Welcome to the Friday Future of Finance Lab. Lance Rubin provides financial modeling with Excel, data analytics with Power BI, and AI tools.
It's going to be a great conversation, I think, around the impact of AI around all of the things we do as solopreneurs, and I guess the tools that we now have and what we do and all of those sort of things. So welcome everyone to the Finance Lab. My name is Lance Rubin. I host the Finance Lab, and I have a great guest, Carl Seidman, who's joining us all the way from the US. I've known Carl for a very long time, and I happen to know that Carl and I share the same birthday on the 3rd of August. And we just discovered that, which is kind of weird, the power of data and insight. So look, Carl's similar to myself, been a trainer for many years and a consultant and a fractional CFO. We both went to PwCs. We both have Big Four upbringing and, how would I say, learning or slaving, whichever way you put it. And really, one of the things that I like about Carl and the content that he puts out is it's honest, it's truthful, and he says things that I'm thinking. And then, so he put out a post around the tools that we've now got, particularly around Claude, are really going to change the way that solopreneurs and fractional CFOs run their businesses and what we do. So that's really the focus of this session. So we're also going to cover off a little bit about the AI-powered accountant. These sessions are really just to talk about some of the concepts there as well. And then we'll obviously wrap up. Carl's going to share some things under the hood for himself in terms of how he's using it, and particularly around Claude, and we're going to run through a few questions. The AI-powered accountant, for those that don't know, it's a program that I've designed. It covers 6 key pillars. Excel fluency. Yes, I hate to tell you, those Excel haters out there, Excel ain't going away. In fact, it's going to get even more powerful and even more used. In fact, we're going to produce more Excel than ever before because we have AI, we've got Claude, we've got Copilot, we've got a range of other things that can actually build some really cool stuff. And we want to check what the AI is doing. So therefore, we need to understand Excel formulas, because if we don't understand what it's doing, how can we trust it? And as financial modelers and accountants, we trade in trust, as Ian was saying, Ian Bennett. And that's our most important asset. And that's AI can't take that away for us, and it's never going to take it away from us. There's process and data, there's assessing technology, there's AI concepts, there's the growth mindset. A lot of Carl and I were talking just before we started about, we oscillate between this is the greatest thing or this is the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity, and is it going to steal our thinking and our learning, and what's it going to do for future generations? And I think it is that. We do have that AI fatigue and that excitement, but then at the same time there's that challenge. But I think the also important thing is the human skills. We have to keep that. And then underpinning all of this is the HACK framework: hygiene, automation, capability, and knowledge. You can't automate on shaky foundations. You've got to have solid foundations, and then really building your own capability around AI, building your knowledge, your team's knowledge, and staying abreast of all of these. Today, we're really mainly going to focus on Claude and touch on that. But of course, a lot of these things come back to these concepts and these tools. Again, if you want to find out more, you can just jump on. There's an article. There's also a podcast that I host on all of these concepts. So, Carl, a bit of a background on you. So you help finance professionals sharpen FP&A, Excel, and modeling. You've been in training for quite a number of years. You're a LinkedIn learning trainer as well. You've got a staggering following: FP&A, business modeling, financial modeling, advanced Excel. I see you also like dynamic arrays and lambdas and lets. So you definitely get my big tick. I've seen and listened to the Financial Modelers Corner where people say, no, let's go learn Python. And no, I don't want to use dynamic arrays and lambdas and these sort of things. So it blows my mind that we're going to learn Python now, but those dynamic arrays and modern Excel formulas are taboo. I actually think that they are very important. FP&A tools, cash flow modeling, data, AI, Claude, and Copilot as well now. And I guess you're like pretty much all the financial trainers out there at the moment. We have to get on board. We have to learn AI. People are asking us to, and we can't resist as much as we want to, because the genie's out the bottle. They're coming to us as experts, and we have to. You have your current focus, which is your FP&A master signature program. Is there anything that I've missed there, Carl, or anything that you want to highlight specifically around your background and highlights for people that don't know you?
No, not too much. I think you covered a lot of it, but one point that I would just reinforce is I think that it's easy for us to get overwhelmed by everything that's going on with AI right now. It's very easy to get fatigued by it. It's easy to get seduced by it. It's easy to get fearful of it. But what I hope for anyone who's here live or watching the recording is that with what Lance said about the two of us is we like to come at this from an impartial and honest and direct point of view. What should you be listening to? What should you be doing? What should you not get swept up by? And really talk about the real use cases. It's not about trying to throw everything that you can. It's trying to identify what's really the best candidates for shifting over to some of this really powerful technology.
Yeah, and okay, and that's hard. I think a lot of people talk about AI is going to do everything, and it can do a lot, but it certainly can't do anything. And I'm looking forward to the FMI Global Leaders Conference, the 24-hour conference that we're going to be running, where I'm going to talk about AI and financial modeling, the reality check. So look out for that. And I think Danielle, who's on here with us as well, is going to be presenting as well. So yes, I think that's important because there's too much noise, and unfortunately, there's too much hype, and it's not a lot of it is grounded in actual real work. And I'm a fractional CFO as well as being a trainer. In fact, up until this point, I've basically over the last sort of 6 to 8 months, I've been doing more training, but I haven't been doing training for a very long time before that because I was swamped with all my CFO, fractional CFO work. But through AI, I've been able to automate a lot of that and now do more training. So I'm coming from a position of I've actually used these things properly in real work. And a lot of people who are out there spruiking AI have not actually put it into practice. They getting AI to build all their training and doing everything. And that's one of the challenges. So Carl, first question, if you were starting today, how would you set up yourself differently to how you were 10 years ago? I think we're both around the 10-year mark in terms of when we started. How would you do it differently?
Yeah, so I think if I were to turn the clocks back, I started my own business 15 years ago, and it was scrappy. It was a lot relied upon me, and I found myself having to wear a whole lot of different hats, hired people over the years. I have a small team now. But I think what I would consider doing is how can I build processes that are clean and repeatable, that are easy to go back to, that aren't completely reliant on me as one or as a team member as two. And I think on the topic of AI is I shared with you, Lance, and I've shared maybe with at least one other person in this room right now. I am now running my entire accounting and finance function for my business off of Claude. And so that is me not having to spend hours a month doing it myself or handing it off to my bookkeeper who would have to do this for hours a month. It's really well integrated. And so I think for somebody who's just starting off by themselves, whether they want to be a small, steady solopreneur or somebody who wants to be positioned for significant growth and expansion, is think about what processes you have. How do you standardize them? How do you scale them? And how do you help automate and augment them? And I think it's a really exciting time now to have that really be quite practical.
Yeah, and that's a good segue on to the next point. How has AI changed how you work? You said obviously a lot of the bookkeeping and the admin work. Is it that, or is it more than just the admin tasks?
So in my business, the majority of work that AI, most specifically Claude, is doing is not related to my actual professional delivery. It's more along the lines of process management and productivity and organization, creating assets out of my existing IP. Yes, we'll certainly talk about different modeling skills that we can use for client delivery, but candidly, and I know we'll talk about this in some of these upcoming questions, is it's one thing to use AI to organize your files and to run your processes and to help you write or organize emails. The error rate that Claude or Copilot or ChatGPT or Gemini or something else can create, while relatively low, the stakes of getting it wrong are not that big of a deal in
Yeah.
those contexts.
Yeah.
But in accounting and finance, even for your own business, if there's a mistake in my own business, okay. Missed invoice, that's a problem. But putting this in front of a client, it is a double risk. It's a risk to you reputationally, but it's a risk to them operationally. And
Mm.
so while I think we're certainly talking a lot about AI in finance here, putting it in financial and accounting context brings with it a whole lot of risk, and we have to keep humans in the loop, roll this out slowly and thoughtfully and prudently. And that's why, even though Lance, you and I are going full speed ahead into this stuff, I'm still very careful about what I say to clients of, yes, you really should go all in on some of this, and no, you shouldn't go all in on some of these over here. Or some of this you can slightly augment, but you still have to be very involved. It's an exciting time. It's interesting to see how we can move all of our work in different ways, but I think we still have to be careful of what as a human still need to be involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think that's the messaging that gets missed in all the hype. There's a stat out there that hallucination risk sits somewhere between 20% and 90%, right? And people say, wow, that is a big range. Yes, because it comes down to context, right? So if I don't give it enough context, the hallucination risk balloons, right? If I give it a lot of context and give it the most perfect prompt with all the data, there is still an element of risk, right? It's not zero, it's small, and maybe I can get rid of it, but you have to have the human in the loop. You have to,
Mhm.
particularly for finance work and particularly for financial modeling. We just luckily recently got a job where the company had built a model. Clearly, they built it on Claude because it had the Claude log in the sheet. And being an avid user of Claude, so on the first call, they said, "Oh, this is our model. It's a 5-year cash flow model, three-way. First, it's annual. It didn't have monthly. Didn't have seasonality. There weren't checks and balances. Didn't have proper working capital. There wasn't an error check. It didn't really have some of the best practices." And so I turned around and I laughed. I said, "So you mean you and Claude built this together?" And he smiled, right? Because I could see straight away it was Claude. We were engaged because basically their accountant said, "I can see this is AI generated. It's not going to stand up against investor presentations or an IM, and we need it to be built properly." So look, modeling for us has dried up a lot over the last 18 months. I'm hoping it's going to come back because I think those are the sort of situations where people start to realize that it's unacceptable, or the risk of taking AI generated models and putting them into IMs and then raising capital is far bigger risk. And it's going to get people into a lot. It looks great, looks incredible. Some of the models are phenomenal, but you peel away the layers and you dig a bit deeper and you find all sorts of trouble. So I guess, how do you frame human verified logic as a premium service when it's delivered fast and clients expect it cheaply? Has that conversation come up yet with your clients?
It hasn't come up in terms of an economic proposition, but I have had conversations with my management consulting firm clients that are doing professional services for their clients.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with this every month over the last few months, including next week, or I'm going to be with another management consulting firm, is they're like, look, we need to learn how to do this because, for one, a lot of these firms are doing roll-ups. So they're gobbling up other firms, other shops. So they can be almost like a one-stop shop for everything financial services. And many of them, they're all itching to get into as an implementation service at their clients,
Yeah.
more so than using AI to deliver their own work product.
Yeah.
So this is a very different way of looking at it, where people like ourselves, Lance, where we're like, oh, how do we involve AI in our work to deliver more productively, faster? Whereas these shops are actually saying, no, we're going to do the implementations of AI technology and
Mm.
skills in our own clients. So it's going to be AI as a service instead of AI as a pillar to deliver. But there is also the discussion because I do AI training in modeling in Excel and more. And a lot of these firms are like, teach us how to do this stuff. And I say, I'll teach you, but are you trying to replace what you're already doing? Are you trying to augment? And oftentimes the response is, yeah, sure, yeah. And I'm like, what is it? What's your objective? And they're like, yeah, whatever you just said. And so here's this weird limbo stage that we're in where
Yeah.
even the best service providers out there are saying, we don't really know what a delivery model of this looks like. And I continue to push back on them and align with your question here as anybody with enough time and enough patience and a modest amount of skill can write skills and prompts to do the things that we do. It's not hard to say you build
No,
this formula, you build
no.
this line, you build this accounting equation. You can literally go into a textbook and say, here is every accounting equation that you need to think about, put it in a skill, build a forecast out of it.
Yeah.
But if everyone in the next couple of years will have that ability, then we're all commodities. What
Yeah.
separates us? What separates us is the critical thinking, is the institutional knowledge, is the industry knowledge, is the ability to say, I can look at something that AI cannot. And Lance, to your point of hallucination between, what'd you say, 20 and 90%? That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's totally crazy. Even the best prompts and skills can still give lots of errors. And if I were to put something that is error prone in front of you and I say, oh, it's built upon really good premium AI skills, and you say, did you look at this? This is wrong. This doesn't reflect reality. And I say, I didn't use my brain. Thinking, critical thinking, understanding logic, understanding nuance, that is what's always going to separate us as service providers from the commodities that are everybody building the same kind of Claude skills.
Yeah, 100%, Carl. And I think one of the things I say to clients is, what's your eval process? What's your evaluation process? Do you even have an eval process of how good these tools are at doing a particular task? I run a full eval on all the latest models on my SaaS model. And actually, I'm presenting that in the Global Leaders 24-hour conference, where I show the latest eval across using Fable, I use the concept of a small blind, big blind, where I actually give it all the formulas, all the sort of all the rest. And I think it is. I think it's an important process because the human in the loop and the critical thinking, it's not optional, it's vital. And I think this is whenever I hear people spruiking autonomous bots and order, this is not automation. I think people are misclassifying AI as RPA and vice versa, right? An RPA bot will get it deterministically right 100% of the time because it's deterministically written in the code in the way that RPA runs. AI doesn't. It's probabilistic. It's going to think about it. And it's not by any other means, purely by design. It's the way the software is written. You can't change that. You can't suddenly make a probabilistic engine deterministic. That's not going to happen. That's not the way this technology was built. And people just don't get it. I was on another client having a conversation, and he said, oh, but surely the AI can just build me that spreadsheet. And I said, oh, yeah, yes, it could, but I don't know how good it would be. And you have to worry about the hallucination risk. And he looked at me weirdly, and I could see he had a grimace on his face. And he said, hallucination. I said, you know what hallucination is? He says, no, I've never heard of it. What is it? So this is someone who's been using AI that's never heard of the word hallucination. And I had to explain hallucination. So that's even more frightening. So someone who's thinking they can use AI and they don't even understand the word hallucination. Your go-to AI tool and why? Carl, like what, and I guess obviously in the beginning, we were all exposed to the OpenAI ChatGPT. How did you go through that process? And I guess where have you landed?
Yeah, I think like most people, ChatGPT made the big splash in the beginning, so that's where I was. I over the years of using it, I started to get very almost offended by how the model evolved, where it's kind of like this sycophantic perspective of it's just, Carl, here's what I recommend. And I say, ChatGPT, you're wrong. It's like, you're right, Carl, I am wrong. It's like, why wouldn't you just say it? So I feel like ChatGPT got into like a very strange gaslighting phase where I was just like, I
Yeah.
can't trust this thing at all. However, I still use ChatGPT for brainstorming, for quick search. I think it's excellent for image generation.
I've heard that.
Well,
I've heard that.
it's very good. I've even, it scares me to do this, but I'll upload pictures of myself and be like, make a picture of me standing in front of Niagara Falls or whatever, and it does it. But it also scares me that it's, oh, anybody can just take your picture and create a bunch of fake graphics of you and use them. But rather than doing Google searches, which is strange to say, oh, I'm moving away from Google searches, I'm often going to ChatGPT to do that. I do pay for ChatGPT Plus or Pro, whatever that I think $20 a month or whatever that is. I do also pay for Gemini. Gemini I think is excellent for research, for pretty deep research. It's also quite good for graphics. So I sometimes will
I
use,
use Gemini for graphics mainly.
pardon?
So I use Gemini mostly for graphics.
Sure. So I would say graphics and research or general chat, ChatGPT and Gemini. Now I'm gonna give a little bit of a maybe biased comment against Copilot. It has certainly gotten better, but I think Copilot was in really bad form for a very long time until it started to incorporate much better use cases and better consistency. I often say to people, I say, look, if you're in Excel, rather than jump out of the platform to go do it somewhere else, utilize the tool there to get the help that you need. This might sound a little immodest, but Lance, I think when you get to a certain level of capability, you probably don't need Copilot to assist in ways that you could probably do it more effectively yourself. But I also think Copilot's done, or Microsoft has done a very good job incorporating the other models underneath the umbrella of Copilot. I think that's very smart. My go-to generally for most things is Claude. I have a max license. I still max out on my tokens even under a max license on occasion. I have two accounts. I have one for myself. I also have one for my team. But Claude, I think, is really superior when it comes to end-to-end processes, really thinking logically, as logical as a machine can be. The connectors are phenomenal. The integrations are
Incredible.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
The ability to support the processes that you have with I think Claude is second to none compared to the others.
And I look, I almost exactly the same, although I don't pay tier. I have a real problem with Sam Altman, but it's a slightly different
That too.
reason. But also the sycophancy and just I just don't like the experience with ChatGPT. So the moment I had the opportunity to play with Gemini, I use Grok for just latest information and news for some search as well from time to time. But yeah, my go-to is Claude as well for most things. I still dabble with Copilot. Copilot Co-work is Claude Co-work dressed up as Copilot. So people have to remember that you have two things to think about when you're thinking about an AI tool. You have the LLM, which is the large language model, and then you have the harness. These are two different concepts, and they actually make very fundamental differences. So in Copilot, you have the Copilot harness with the Claude LLM. That is very different to you using the Claude harness and the Claude LLM in Excel. Let's just talk Excel for the moment. So I think when you're starting to use that, the Copilot harness has got a long way to go to get anywhere close to Claude's harness for many reasons. The skills are slowly starting, but they're not quite there yet. But yeah, I slightly different, but definitely on Claude 100%. What should accounting and finance people focus on? I think one of the challenges that you and I are fortunate. We run our own businesses. We don't have a boss to report to. We don't have a 9 to 5 job that, although sometimes it would be nice, to be honest, a 9 to 5 job to turn up on Monday morning and then come back from it every night and then turn off after hours, which again would be nice, but not reality for you and I. But one of the things we do have the benefit of is to dabble and make the decisions around what technology we look at, where we spend our time, what we learn. What should general people do, particularly if I'm thinking about organizations that, let's say, they only allow Copilot, for example, and they don't have Claude, or organizations that actually completely ban AI altogether? So what do you think people should focus on? Where should they go?
Yeah, what I tell most people are like, Carl, there's just so much to learn. It's moving so fast. The first piece of advice I say is pick one of them, pick one of the four that I've named, and just play around. Just play with
Yeah,
it. Get comfortable with the interaction. Pay attention to the way that it's responding to certain prompts. And I know that prior to, let's say, October of 2025, the world was all about, oh, it's prompts. And I was like, I could write the same prompt today, I could write the same prompt next week, and I get completely different answers.
yeah,
How helpful is this? You at least still get practice understanding the way that these things work. But when it comes to accounting and finance, as I said to you before, you get an email wrong, okay, maybe it's embarrassing. You get financial numbers wrong, you put it in front of a client, it can be catastrophic. And so I don't recommend people say, "Oh, let me replicate my month close in AI. Let me go for the biggest mandate that I can possibly think of." No, pick something that is a cliche low-hanging fruit.
commentary.
Yeah, something that is easy, frustrating, repeatable, low risk, and riff back and forth with Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever you want and say, look, I'm trying to come up with coding for my business expenses. I would like to develop a skill or a process in Claude Coworker or whatever you choose that every single month on the third of the month, it takes a look at the expenses of the past month and it helps me with the coding. Now, rather than just leave it at that, what Claude's going to do is it's going to run amok, it's going to go crazy, and it's going to come up with whatever it wants. So you have to put guardrails in place to say, I'm currently using this system. This is the way it's currently set up. In this first part of the build of the process, I only want to focus on this piece until we completely iron this out, or extensively interview me so that we can get this first part done. Now, what some people might say is, how do I even know that's the first part? Take a step back and say, Claude, I actually want to come up with what is the first step, second step, third step, fourth step of what does this whole process look like? And now, within each one of those steps, let's peel back that onion and let's get that right. But focus on something that's easy, something that's frustrating, something that's repeatable, something that's relatively low risk, and perfect that first, or at least codify that first, and then run it again and see where it's making mistakes, and run it again and see where it's making mistakes. Because, Lance, what I'm finding, and to all of the points you're making, is it's probabilistic, it's going to color outside of the lines, is there will probably be mistakes. There will probably be where it doesn't do what you want. So that's why you start with something simple that you can audit, something low risk that when it does get it wrong, it's not catastrophic. You start getting comfortable with that, cleaning it up, making it tighter, and then you start moving on to other processes. So that's what I often say to people is just start getting comfortable. Don't feel like you're behind. Don't feel like AI is this seductive thing that you got to go all in on. Just identify what you can start to use right away, and that's easy.
Yeah, you're actually touching on it. It's actually on the next slide called system thinking. And it's a very big part of what we teach in the AI-powered accounting program because it's not about the prompt. It's not about that particular one part of the process. It's actually the whole system. It's actually the end-to-end, the start, the middle, and the end. And the end bit is like, how do I know it's right? Let me put guardrails in place. In fact, when Claude writes skills, for everyone who doesn't know, it doesn't automatically put in gotchas, right? Claude skills don't get written automatically with gotchas, those guardrails where it makes mistakes. So you run the skill that makes mistakes, you have to catch them, and then you have to update the skill to make sure that it catches it next time, so that you constantly refining and refining the skill. it doesn't do it out of the box straight away. And in fact, what we did is we built our foundation skill in skill writing. So we built a skill to write a skill. Now, Anthropic has out of the box a skill creator skill, which is fine, but that skill creator skill lacks a lot of the best practices around some of the guardrails, some of the things that we need to make sure that it's accurate. So,
Lance, there's some questions are coming through the chat window. I don't know if
yeah,
you want to take a look at any of those. Looks like there are several now.
let's,
Or if you want to address those later on.
yeah, awesome. Thanks, Danielle, for that link. To what event do you work with AI and train it better with human insight?
So I think Henry's question is maybe it's to what extent of if you're training AI, are you giving it your IP? And Henry, I think that's the trillion-dollar question is these models years ago were trained on a lot of open source and publicly available information to get started. And I don't know, it's weird to turn the clocks back and say, oh, years and years ago, what were we doing with ChatGPT? Oh, the answers are terrible. And yet we continue to feed our own information in it, which of course it was using to train itself even better. And then the results got better, and oh, let's put even more information in. So, Henry, to your point of are we losing our IP? I'm sure many of us are. I'm putting my own skills into Claude and into Copilot. And is there anything that's going to prevent Anthropic from saying, oh, I'm going to take Carl's skills. Oh, I see Lance's skills. Oh, I see Henry's skills. Let me harvest all of these, and we're going to build our own Anthropic skills that we're going to make open source to the whole world. So that's why I think it's extremely dangerous to completely delegate all of our livelihood and all of our work to the machine. Back to Lance's question on what is human verified logic? Is that a premium service? Yes and yes. Because once AI gets good enough that it is able to do all of this without us, we still have our brains. We still have our critical thinking. We still have our institutional knowledge that is going to be more important than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we are, whether we like it or not, we are giving up a portion of our IP to these bodies. Obviously, they were trained on post-training, GPT, post-training model. They were trained on information. Now they are using reinforcement learning and actually creating data and recursively. A lot of this stuff is actually doing and learning as we go, and it is learning as we go. But that's why it's so important to keep those human skills, those critical thinking skills, those communication, make those better, because in the end, those other elements of what we do is going to get better, and that's okay. But it's by design never going to work well. Matthew Lee, open weight models, locally computed. I think this is a really good question. And I think this is where the world is going to go. I think right now, the open source, open weight models are not at the frontier from performance wise. For me, it's all about Excel. It is. That's where I do 90% of my work. I need to have these models. And that's why I continue to use Tab AI, because Tab AI is going to allow me, it's my perplexity of Excel. It's going to allow me to tap into these open source models and move away from the Claude or Opus or any one of those or any of the open AI models. I need to have a harness. For me, that's Tab AI, that I can then switch to these other models. Claude's not going to do that for me. Copilot's not going to do that for me. They're not going to want me to run my own locally hosted. And in fact, Tab AI actually do have the ability to locally host that environment. Now, when you say locally hosting, you're talking about a fairly substantial CapEx spend, right? That's going to have to sit behind this. This is not just, I'm just going to have my laptop sitting on the side. They're building data centers for these things, right? And people can say, oh, I can hire compute. Hang on, if I'm hiring compute from somewhere else, how is that any different to hiring compute from Anthropic, right? So it's a really complex topic, but yes, until you actually own your own instance of an LLM and train it and it works well. But I think that's where the competition is going to come. I think the token costs are heavily subsidized at the moment. And at some stage, that's going to come and bite us. How often do you rely on pre-built skills or open source? Even none at all, to be honest. I build my own. In fact, and the reason I don't use the open source ones is they lack the guardrails, they lack the depth of what I want. I actually wrote an article on this around the Anthropic skills. I've built over 200 skills. In fact, I hit the limit. By the way, you can only build 200 skills. It doesn't tell you that, but I hit it and I couldn't do another skill. So I had to go back. I had to triage, I had to change. I then converted some of those skills to plugins and then shrunk it down. And I retired some old skills that I hadn't used for a while. But yeah, I just don't find the open source ones are any good. Some of the skills are actually okay when they come with the connectors to what Carl was saying with those connectors. Like those skills, those skills are actually quite good because they're using the connector with the skill to make it a plugin. So if I want to pull data out of HubSpot, for example, for me, or jump into my inbox, or look at my calendar, or jump into Google, my Google Drive, I asked it to compare my files. I wanted to see, since I've started using AI, what are the types of files I've been creating within my Microsoft environment? How's it changed over the last 3 to 5 years? And I asked it to plot all of that, look at all my files across the whole of my Microsoft 365, and it did it. And it was incredible to see visually all the files that I've got in my Microsoft 365. Now, was it 100% perfect? Probably not. There's probably, but visually and thematically, it gave me a good understanding. I think that's pretty much all of the questions that we've held there, Carl.
I would also add to Eva's question about the open source skills. Anthropic really made a splash some time ago when they introduced financial
Finance.
services skills and
Yeah.
accounting skills. The financial services skills are what Lance is alluding to, is like a lot of plugins to third-party platforms. And when Lance was talking about more automated versus deterministic, like if you're using Capital IQ or some public, not even public, but like publicly available firewalled financial information, you can have your AI just constantly pull that stuff and go into Claude and then push it where you want it to go. You don't really need to be involved in that. But with the accounting skills, maybe to what Lance was saying before, like I've played with probably a third of them. There's not a ton of them, but like I played with the financial statement one. That's the one I can remember. And it's very vanilla. It's okay, you're going to take a look at this set of financials and it's going to give you actuals. This is going to be budget. It's going to give you variance by dollars. It's going to give you variance by percentage. And you might say, okay, that's pretty basic. That's pretty vanilla. Any company could do that. But the problem is you can't edit the skill. Anthropic has in the skills, I don't know if it's a licensing agreement or some kind of legal disclaimer. That's Anthropic's, and you can't change that. Now, of course, someone like Lance could say, all right, well, I'm going to build my own financial statement preparation skill in a way that Anthropic doesn't cut it. So the open source skills, I think, are a great place to play around. And when I
And
was
to
playing
start.
around with them, and to start, and when I was playing around with them, I'm like, oh, this is really cool, but I can take this a step further and a step further and a step further in the way that I want it, the way that I need it. And that I think is again what's really important about the commodity discussion is if everybody just takes the same skills that Anthropic produces, then everybody is presenting the same exact analysis, just on different numbers and different companies. The propriety that each one of us can bring of what do you really know about business, of your industry, of a certain type of model, of a certain type of forecast. Build your skills based upon your own frameworks rather than just plugging into the ones that Anthropic or OpenAI's or others present.
Yeah, good point. I might just combine the two last questions, Carl, together where, what are the key skills that you would need, we think you need as a fractional CFO, solopreneur, and I guess where should finance leaders start? So if you're a finance leader or you're starting your own business, what are the key skills that you think you need? And I'm not talking about skills in terms of markdown files and those skills. I'm just talking holistically, the skills that you think you need to run your business and the skills you need to be a leader, a finance leader. And
These are going to be completely the opposite of probably what anybody thinks I'm going to say. Sales, marketing, and effective communication. So everything that we're talking about here of like accounting and finance,
yeah,
those are table stakes. Those
yeah,
you have to have. If you don't have
yeah,
those, okay, don't get into this line of business. But what I failed to understand when I first got started was, oh, my work is just going to speak for itself. And as I do good work, all of the work is going to come in. All of this interest is going to pile on top of me, and I'm just going to have so much to do. as long as your clients are actively thinking about referring you,
Yeah.
and your friends and your colleagues and your course alumni and whoever else are actively thinking about you, great, they're going to make those referrals and those introductions. I hate to say it, I'm a busy guy. I'm not always thinking about you. So you've got to be a marketer. You've got to be a salesperson. You also need to think about how do you help people by being a giver, by being a thoughtful person, by making connections between them and somebody who you know, not to the benefit of yourself, but to the benefit of them. And that's how you build goodwill. That's how you build a brand for yourself. And that's how you grow an effective business.
Yeah, excellent. Great advice. Great advice. So, jumping just quickly, when we talk about the AI powered accountant, there's two key concepts that always people need to think about. The first thing is system thinking, and I loved how you unpacked that exact example around the coding for those expenses. We have to think about the system. We have to think about the interconnectedness of data and process. And so when you start to work on AI, it's not about the task, it's about the system. It's the beginning, the middle, and most important, the end, because that's what I need to look at: the orchestration layer, the validation, the human in the loop, right? Where am I going to put the human? Where am I going to put the AI? Who's going to do what? What are the guardrails? Given the hallucination risk, what am I going to do? So a very important concept for people to grab and listen and think about is system thinking. And the next is, don't ever think that the better the model, suddenly this probabilistic, very smart guessing slot machine is going to suddenly become deterministic. It's not going to happen, right? You can throw Fable at it, you can throw Mythos, you can throw any of the most powerful models. All they're going to do is they're going to produce more convincing, more beautiful, more attractive outputs that are still going to be fundamentally wrong, right? Unless you've checked and made sure that it's correct. So together, these things are key. When you're working with AI, we have to think about system thinking, and you cannot forget and you cannot trust that whatever gets produced by AI is, you almost have to go in with the mindset that it's completely wrong, and you need to validate. I'm not saying every single number, but this is why every single one of our skills and every single one of our prompts asks for validations and checks. Every single time I want something, no hard coding, and making sure that we've got all of that in place. And then how do you do that? You have to have hygiene, automation, capability, and knowledge. There's technical skills in how you understand that, Excel fluency, and then there's the softer human skills. And I think back to Henry's point, those top bits 1 and 2 is where our IP is sitting, and that's largely going to be automated. But we still need to understand the tech. You have to understand AI concepts. You have to understand tokens. It's not for free. We might have a plan and a limit. And as I was talking, I just saw my Anthropic bill come through, and it's higher than my set amount by $50. I'm like, what the hell? My son's been using my Fable model to do stuff, and Fable's no longer included in plan. It's an add-on. So he's going to get a blast when he gets home because he's been using Fable, and I've kicked him out. And he's like, oh, Dad, let us back in. I'm like, no, you can get your own account, because I had excess tokens for him to play with. So anyway, there you go. Growth mindset, human skills, soft skills are so important. When you start to think about AI and you need to abstract in the system, when I talk system, I talk about beyond prompting, right? Everyone talks about prompts, and exactly what Carl was saying is, it's not just about the prompt. It's actually about the skill on top of the prompt. And then you have to think about, what are the connectors? What are the MCPs? What am I going to connect the skills to? Because then I'm going to have another layer of information, and then I'm going to build artifacts on top of that. So what are artifacts? Artifacts are dashboards or JavaScript files or HTML reports, or I'm going to show a few in a moment. And then you go to level 5, and that's digital workers, which is what I've got, which is skills of skills. They're multi-level skills. So I have Hulk, who does all my ops management. Hulk taps into my MCP for my Google and my Microsoft and applies the skills to build my daily brief dashboard, which is an artifact. So those are the things that you need to think about when you're starting to stack technology and AI on top of the layers of complexity. And look, it's incredibly powerful, incredibly useful. Just quickly on the training program, we run through 10 modules. All of these are prepackaged prompts, workbooks, analysis. We get to build some skill files, and you get to learn how to use the foundation skills and all the rest. And these are important. You can see from this, there's no build a financial model in the training, because I don't think that is a useful thing to do. And I think there's the big risk with that, and I'll talk more about that in the global conference. These are the things that I've built: a daily briefing artifact, over 200 skills. That's 196. That was just before I hit the limit. I've now had to repackage and change that. I now have an AI projects hub command center. So I'm now running AI training, AI coaching. And this week we just signed our first AI program for a client to roll out AI across the organization. Excel Cloud, we have 19 skills. These are skills that are attached to workbooks that pull data out of Zero, multi-entity, like creating board packs, mapping tables, anomaly detector, assumption builder. You have a financial model and you want to build one-page assumption builder, or you've got these really complex dynamic arrays and lambdas, and you want to explain it to someone. That's a skill that we built. As I mentioned, the eval process. And then we're building the 6th generation of modeling, which is using Excel, your interactive dashboards, HTML reports, all end-to-end. So I think it's pretty exciting. Cole's shared this example. I think this is his weekly cash flow. I know we've only got about 10 minutes. Sorry, Cole. I know we spent a lot more time chatting, but maybe you want to just walk through for folks what you built.
Yeah, so I've been sharing this over the last few weeks with people. Yeah, so I have taken a lot of time to codify my own frameworks. I have built dozens and dozens of weekly cash flows over the last 15 years. And a lot of people are asking me, it's like, okay, if I were to use AI, what might be a use case? If I wanted to augment some of my existing processes, what might I do? And consistent with what Lance and I have been talking about is it's not about prompts and saying, here's the data, build me a model. What I started with was, okay, I want to build my process to replicate what I'm already doing. And I had to say, this is the framework that I use. And I was going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with Claude to have it build my skill for me that I would then upload into it that it would rely upon. And what I thought was going to start with, oh, let's just go for a 30-minute exercise, it ended up going the entire day just for one part of one model, just one type of model. And what was happening, for better, not for worse, was that there were lots of edge cases, lots of exceptions, where it was, what if this happens, Carl, what do you want me to do? And then I had to give it an answer. Okay, Carl, what if this happens? Okay, I want you to proceed with this. So there's a lot of different considerations that need to go into this. It's almost like you could tell a staff member on your team, this is exactly what I want you to do every step of the way, every single time. You got to tell Claude to do that. Otherwise, it's going to run amok and it's going to make stuff up. In addition, you can create skills to say, under no circumstances do you run amok and make anything up. If you hit an edge case and it's not clear within the skill what to do, you go back to the modeler and you ask what should be done. So every single thing that you see here, this is not me formatting it green, dark green, mid green, light green. This is not me formatting whatever in bold. It's not me adding in borders. I'm even calling myself out looking at this that I've got dollar signs on all the lines. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, that should be taken away. So I should probably go back into the skill and say, remove all dollar signs or remove all currency, make everything in number format because...
Yeah, and your month and your day is the wrong way around as well.
Oh, yes, of course. So Lance is joking because he's in Australia and they do everything wrong. All of us in the United States do everything right. But no, in all seriousness, if you don't tell Claude what to do and what not to do, it is not going to follow your rules. And so it's quite literally codifying your frameworks. And that's what this result and what this output is.
Yeah, wonderful. And look, what I like about what you just said, Carl, is Now, people just think, give it a prompt, 5 minutes later, you have a model, right? It's not that. It's a day of work, of hard work, of deep
On one
work
part.
on one
On one
particular
part.
on one part, just to get that right. We're not talking about a full three-way model here. We're just talking about a weekly cash flow model, which in theory is significantly simpler than a full three-way model, right? Arguably a lot simpler, but lots of edge cases, lots of things that you've got to think about. And it took a day just to do the skill. And still, using that skill over time, effectively, you still have to check it. You still got to make sure that what it produces is correct.
Yeah. And you know what I'm just sharing here? I just presented up 4 of the skills. There's more that I have that I'm just clearing out, but here's 4. I've got financial modeling foundation, which is just across any financial model. What rules do you follow? Blue for inputs, black for formulas, etc., etc. It's there. But the 13-week cash flow builder AR says, I will build a AR forecast. That's the one you just saw, but it's referring to the financial modeling foundations.
Yes.
So that you don't have to duplicate these rules. And going back to Lance of token usage, if you create extensive, redundant, unnecessary skills, you're going to cost yourself by doing that. The
And
financial modeling,
confusion, because the AI is going
right.
to then run into conflicts.
It's going to say, which one do you want me to follow? The auditor says, okay, instead of me building the model, let me take a look at what you've done. And I love this auditor. What it does is it takes a look and it identifies vulnerability and it ranks the vulnerability of this is a material error, priority level 1. This is a nice to know, you don't need to fix it, but this is my recommendation. And then the Carl voice is this is how I actually write narratives and observations within my work files using my own writing and talking style. Again, here are 4. I've got several dozen of these. I don't have 200. I'm nowhere near where Lance is. I've got several dozen of these that, when connected to each other, they can really work magic. But the more that you add, the more complexity it can also bring into these processes as well. So you have to be very, very thoughtful and not just say, hey, I'm just going to go all in and be reckless with a wrecking ball.
Yeah, I've got an article coming out, which is a bit embarrassing, about my sprawl, my skill sprawl, just like you've got spreadsheet sprawl, and I had to clean up my house a little bit. I guess this is the skill, the markdown syntax.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, sorry, there's a lot more there. This is the file that's being used for that AR build. And you can see some of this is formatting, some of this is presentation, but you got to be really thoughtful of what you want it to do. If you don't tell it what you want it to do, it's going to do its own thing.
So, Carl, do you have gotchas in your skill, or do you use the auditor to check for gotchas afterwards?
A little bit of both. So, what I actually did a recent webinar where I used this skill and then I used the exact same thing, but I removed a fork in basically an interview fork, and I put a really goofy message into the skill. And I said, everyone, I'm just making this slight change. Let's see what happens. And in Claude's response on the second one, it was like, it appears you might have intentionally put a tripwire in for me. I didn't fall for it. And I was like, oh, at least Claude's got a sense of humor. So it's a good idea to put some gotchas in here to say, look, if something doesn't pass a certain test, make that known. Or if something's missing, don't proceed. You can do this through the skill itself, or you can put an auditor skill to go backwards.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff. And I think that that's the big distinction around, I'm just going to create a whole bunch of skills, to actually creating them with purpose, function, and real context to make sure that you can get those results. So look, key takeaways, obviously, please share your thoughts with colleagues and others. And the recording will be available, obviously, on the Maven platform. We'll eventually share it on the Knowledge Hub. Some of these slides are also on Eloquence, and the podcast on Spotify. So yeah, get ready for the future. Obviously, Model Suzumi run a whole bunch of things for training and learning, code development, and all the rest. And of course, there's many different places that you can learn and listen. And yeah, thanks again, Carl, for your time. It's great. And yeah, I saw that question by Eva, Claude Code. Yeah, I use Claude Code a little bit. I'm kind of similar to you. I'm mostly in chat or co-work, In fact, I'm probably more inside Excel, to be frank. Most of my work, because I'm doing client work and functionally, I'm in Excel, I'm in Word, I'm in PowerPoint with Claude inside those environments. But thanks, everyone. Have a great Friday. You have a great evening, Thursday night there, Carl. And thanks for your time and good luck out there and keep up the great work.
Of course, great to see you, Lance. Thank you all. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us at the Finance Lab.